In some Western European countries, we have to face new trends. On the one side, there are perpetrators from certain anti-globalization movements, and on the other side, people of migrant background. This applies to people with Polish and Russian roots, but particularly also to youngsters with an Arab or even Turkish background. Profound research has been done on right extremism, but also on left-wing anti-Semitism. However, there is still a lack on empirical data concerning anti-Semitism in the migrant communities in Germany. Only a few perpetrators of Muslim descent committed crimes with an anti-Semitic background in Germany so far. Most of such crimes are still coming, the overwhelming majority are still coming from the right extreme source. Anti-Semitic resentments of young people with Muslim migrant background are more a reflection of a discriminated minority as a strong anti-Semitic worldview. Forms of anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist prejudices today are mainly to be watched in verbal derailments on schoolyards. It is not limited to students of Muslim migrant background. Swear words like "you Jew," "du Jude" are widespread, often uncritically or expressed as a provocation. Anyway, this needs to be addressed, but in its context. In recent years, the impression that anti-Semitic dispositions are particularly a phenomenon of young people of Arab or Turkish descent has got a wide media coverage in Germany. The realization that this population group is not free of such prejudices has only gradually enforced and has long been suppressed. There is, however, the question of why this late insight now got the focus of attention. Has the focus on the Islamized anti-Semitism, as a colleague of, as Michael Kiefer calls it, in Germany, not gained a sustained function as a displacement of confrontation with anti-Semitic stereotypes in the majority society? And doesn't it fit too well in the repertoire of Islamophobic attitudes and is welcomed as a depth right up against the Muslims in Germany? The theme Islamized anti-Semitism must by no means be omitted, but must be set in the right relative to other carrier layers of anti-Semitism in German society. Extremist right-wing anti-Semitic crimes are still a bigger threat to Jews in Germany. Nevertheless, it has to be stated that we are not dealing with state-initiated or supported insults by any of the European countries as in the 1930s. Comparisons to the 1930s drawn by some politicians and representatives in the world are miss the mark. Today, unlike the 1930s, we have to state awareness to and analysis of anti-Semitism within the scientific world. And as I already said, in the better part of the political establishment. Investigation of anti-Semitic threats by state authorities and court procedures against perpetrators are basic principles not to be compared with the Nazi persecution of the Jews. In Germany, anti-Semitic expressions by politicians or political leaders within the democratic spectrum are not tolerated. If this has occurred in the last years, they have been expelled from the political parties. Anti-Semitic violent acts are openly bashed by political leaders. But we have to admit that the sensibility for the borderlines between legitimate criticism of Israeli politics and statements with anti-Semitic connotations is not anymore anymore the same as it was 20 years ago. This does not mean that there is a rise in anti-Semitism, but the taboo to express anti-Semitic feelings seems to soften. This is especially evident looking on letters and emails the Central Council of Jews in Germany or even the Israeli embassy in Berlin receives. Opinion polls on mainstream attitudes vis-à-vis Jews in Germany have not shown any substantial change in the last years. It's always this level of 15 to 20%. Numbers of threats and abuses against Jewish institutions, synagogues, and cemeteries for the years 2001 to 2008, registered by the Office of the Protection of the Constitution, showed around 1,500 to 1,600 anti-Semitic criminal acts, most of them verbal threats and propaganda. Of the total, there were between 30 to 60 violent acts, also included desecration of anti-Semitic threats against Jewish cemeteries, for example. In 2008, from the total of 47 violent acts, 44 were committed by right extreme perpetrators, 2 by perpetrators of the so-called extreme left, and 1 by, as they call it, foreigners. That means people with migrant background, but it's not clear what background they have. It's one case. The numbers of 2009, not already officially public, show that in January 2009, around the Gaza war, the number of criminal acts arose considerably to 315, where since 2007 the monthly data lay around 2030. The impact of the Gaza war was obviously already in December 2008, where the violent acts raised. The number of these are the cases, and it's seen that foreign policy, let's say Israel, and politics in Israel have an impact on anti-Semitism, but does not mean that if there will be peace in your region that there's no more anti-Semitism, as sometimes people say. So this is a wrong connection. But you can see that a radicalization of the problem in Israel and the Palestinian, the occupied territories, has an impact on anti-Semitism. The number of teachers seeking help and advice at our Center for Research on Anti-Semitism, the keen demand for teacher further education, a surprisingly strong participation at the annual summer universities against anti-Semitism staged by our center, all this indicates the strain and the challenges faced by teachers today, and moreover highlights that only long-term projects against anti-Semitism can lastingly offset the deficiencies in education. At the same time, however, the topic of anti-Semitism must be brought to the attention of state and municipal education authorities. Increasing their sensibility is crucial, for without recommendations from politicians and school authorities, the large majority of teachers and educationalists who do not appreciate the necessity of addressing current forms of anti-Semitism over and above the well-rehearsed routine of excursions to memorial sites and Holocaust education will not be open to new educational approaches in this thematic complex. After all, we have to sensitize the public that anti-Semitism is not a problem of Jews or Israel, and that not Israel or the Jews have to solve this problem, but the majority society has to become aware that anti-Semitism is still a problem today. It will not be solved, as I just said, if the Middle East conflict will once end, because either Israel nor the Jews are guilty for anti-Semitic stereotypes.